Hello, my name is Marcus Womack. I'm the Minister of Outreach here at Grace Avenue, one of our associate pastors, and we're again talking simple generosity today, and we're joined by Kenneth and Suzanne Wolverton, longtime members of Grace Avenue here, and they're going to share some of their story of generosity and especially what it means for us to commit, like we're inviting everyone in our church family to do this weekend, to the work of God in our world through our church together. Kenneth and Suzanne, thank you all for sharing your story and being part of the conversation. I'd like to first maybe ask, can you tell a little bit about your story with Grace Avenue? What brought you here? What keeps you here? Y'all have been very much a part of this church family and our story for a long time.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I actually am very honored to be able to say that I was one of the first 10 that actually started here at the church. Billy came to my house, and I think he got my name through my first wife's father, who was a Methodist minister. And Billy asked us to be a part of the planning committee and to look at how we would do this. And I was honored to be a part of that. I often tell people I was here at the church before the church had a name. And I say honor because it's just been a remarkable part of my life to watch this church grow and to see the number of people that this church has impacted their life and what this church has come to mean to Suzanne and I and our family has just been an incredible journey of almost 20 years now. And it's been terrific. You ask what keeps me coming back, and I think I would have to say it's the friendships that we've made, it's the missions that we've been on, it's the staff that we've come to love. And we just love being a part of this church and what this church stands for. And, we couldn't be happier with the mission to eradicate homelessness and what that's meant and the results that we've already seen and the promise of the results to come. And so we're looking forward to that.
Wonderful. Suzanne, would you add anything?
I joined Grace Avenue when Kenneth and I got engaged. It was important for us as we were blending our families that we have a solid foundation in our church home. And so Ryan and I joined Grace Avenue and have just been as involved as we can be throughout the years. And it's been our spiritual home. When we were traveling between Houston and Austin and Frisco on a weekly basis, this was the place that we came together as a family. This was our home. So
yeah, it's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you all for offering all that you've given, your gifts, your time, your prayers, presence, gift, service, witness, like we say when we join the church. It's part of what makes our church family happen is folks like y'all who offer your presence and all that you give. So as a church, over the last few weeks, we've had these conversations with John Wesley's invitation that he offered about money, to give, to earn all you can, to save all you can, and to give all you can. And specifically, we have this invitation this weekend for our entire church family to commit to that work intentionally by offering their estimates of giving and their example and offering of generosity for the church to come. Would you share about maybe your story with giving to church and faith and Grace Avenue, and especially that maybe what it meant for y'all to grow into that kind of intentional commitment?
Well, I was brought up in a Baptist household. Tithing was very important. But my father was an extremely generous human being. I mean, he would give the shirt off his back for somebody in need. He was always great at finding people that needed things and how could he serve them. So when I got my first paycheck, I was so proud. Look, I got my paycheck. He was like, great, go get your checkbook. And we sat down and he showed me how to write my first check from my paycheck, and that first check was to the church. And so I got paid weekly, so every Friday when I got my paycheck, I came home, I sat down with my paycheck, with my checkbook, and I wrote that 10% check went to church first, went to God first. And being able to give first to God was instilled in me very young. As I grew up, and as a lot of young adults do, kind of fell away from church. I became a single mom. I was going to school. I didn't have money to give. I didn't have hardly any money to eat on, much less to give. I tried to give of my time, but I actually missed that. I missed being able to contribute financially to the kingdom. And when Kenneth and I got together, and I was, I had already gotten back on my feet and was starting to do some more, being able to do more. When Kenneth and I got together and we made that first commitment together, it was uncanny how from that point on, when there's a number, we are so close in our thoughts. And I think part of that is because we go to that prayerfully. We go to that part of our lives, asking God how that we can best serve Him. And it's uncanny how often the numbers come up the same.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So my journey was very different. I didn't necessarily grow up in the church, although we went periodically. So I didn't do a lot of giving as a young adult. And so when I started getting involved in church and started thinking about making an intentional commitment, that 10% was thrown at me. And I got to be honest, my first reaction was, what? Yeah. I'm going to go from nothing to 10% of my income, and it seemed beyond my capability to even get there or to think about it. And so I actually had to sort of come back and say, okay, I want to give, I want to be intentional. I can't do 10%. What can I do? What can I live with, live into? And obviously there's the fear factor of being concerned about not having enough and so on and so on. And so I got to be honest, when I first started, it was probably less than 1%. But there was something about that intentional every single month of something back to God, and it became a journey for me, a journey over 25 years. And it just seemed like every single year I'd sort of go, that wasn't so bad. I can do a little more. I can stretch a little more. Or there might have been years where I was just really blessed. Maybe I got a raise, or maybe something else happened, and you sort of go, okay, well, I can start giving 10% of that because I wasn't using that anyway. And you just sort of build and build and build until we got to a point that, it was just part of what we do now. And so suddenly you're just there. And what seemed totally impossible to me is now very possible. And I know there's probably a lot of other people in our church who just can't imagine ever getting there. And I guess just stick with it. Just start somewhere. And you never know what God's going to do to help you get there. And so what I would say is just do it.
Yeah, we have that conversation a lot, especially we have this at Invitation to Grace Avenue when new families join the church. We kind of walk through our values around giving as a church, our hopes and expectations if you're a member of our church family, what that means to prayerfully and intentionally even just find where you are. And we talked about some of that last week with Give All You Can. I wonder, do you have any practical tips about communication together and making that kind of commitment intentionally, what that looks like when you're planning for the next year, when you're filling out that estimate of giving card, and just any practical either suggestions or things y'all have learned in your time in doing that kind of thing as a couple in our church?
Well, as Suzanne said, I mean, we don't sit down and say, well, this is what I think. What do you think? Yeah. Immediately, we're like, okay, let's pray about this. Let's think about this. The other reality in today versus maybe our forefathers is before you gave to the church. Now, there's other charitable organizations asking for your commitment and asking for other things. And so those discussions take on a broader effort on our part. And so now we both sort of sit down and think about it and pray about it, and then we come back together. And as Suzanne already said, it's amazing how many times we sort of come to something very close.
Sure.
And, part of this whole giving to the church that I've never been able to know how to really explain to people somewhere along that journey for me, it went from being this obligation, this moment of servitude, if you will, to this moment of I'm just thanking God for everything that He's done in my life, and so this is not, for me, it's no longer a gift of money, but it's what can we do with God's money to impact the lives of others in some unique way. And so it takes on a new dimension, and it takes on a dimension more of gratitude and thanks, and being able to help others more so than an obligation to try to hit some number that I feel guilty if I don't hit. And I don't know where that happened, to be honest. And I wished I could express that joy of watching what happens when you get there and what you do about that. But
isn't that so often the case in life, though? Like, I think so often we want these like movie cinematic moments of here's the light shining down and this is where it all clicked. But so often maybe it's habit, it's discipline, it's trusting a little more. And then maybe you look back, it's like erosion carving out the Grand Canyon. You look back and this slow and steady process in your life has created something really beautiful and something really significant that maybe was baby steps along the way that turned into something over the years, into something really substantial. So, Suzanne, would you add anything else to that?
I think it's, and I don't know if it could be part of the faith journey, but just to, instead of coming from a place of obligation, because there's always a little pain in that, but to come from a place of gratitude and how to respond to that gratitude. And we've had a tough last few years with our aging parents and our own health issues. This has nothing to do with money. This has to do with the huge abundance of blessings that God has poured out on us through all of that, and to respond to that with gratitude and wanting to take those blessings out into the kingdom, I think is kind of where we are at this point.
I think that's a beautiful way to say that. Thank you for both for sharing y'all's experiences there. I think that's one of the hopes we have for folks is that maybe if it starts as an intentional act, we see that trust can grow, that thanksgiving and gratitude can grow, that even joy can grow in something that maybe, like you shared, your shock, the sticker shock value of saying, wait, 10% of my income. I joked about this in my sermon last week, but we'd use this Hebrew scripture standard of 10% or a tenth of people's production in their fields or their livestock or whatever business they were in, giving that to God. The New Testament standard is actually 100%. Jesus says, give me everything. And so that's our hope, is that it's really giving our entire lives in some form or fashion. And I think y'all have shared really beautifully what that looks like for your heart to grow and your soul to grow and your whole life to grow in this act of generosity. I would wonder, maybe in closing, because you shared so many rich things, I think we could probably talk about this all day long. Would you maybe talk a little bit more about maybe your hopes for generosity for our church at Grace Avenue, maybe your hopes now, your hopes for what generosity might do in the future for our church?
Wow. I think for me, it's just that everyone that needs a place finds a place. And what a blessing it would be if our church becomes that place for them to call home, because that is, everybody needs a home. And we have so many new families that are moving into this community who are, they're unpacking their lives into a whole new scene, and to find home, a spiritual home and an emotional home, in addition to a physical home, through Grace Avenue, I think would be a huge blessing to our community.
Kenneth, would you add anything to that?
Well, that's really good, but I don't know. For me, I guess some people would think after being here 20 years that I'd be comfortable with where we are, and I'm very grateful where we are, but I think we still got a lot more that we can do as a church. And I feel like if you begin to think about the future and you think about our vision to eradicate homelessness in whatever form that may be. And you begin to think about the number of people that still don't have the joy of belonging to a church. They still don't have the joy of having friendships and relationships and being able to go out on missions and help others and do all of those kind of things. I hope that we as a church never stop. I hope we continue to look forward and continue to dream about what God can do through us as a church. And that's going to take everybody. That's going to take all of us continuing to trust, as you said, in where it goes. And through that process, I hope that people do make that jump from feeling like this is something that I have to do to something that gives them a great joy in being able to do it and being able to give back and being able to say, thank you, God, for everything you've given me. Now let me be a vessel to go serve others. And because once again, until you've done it, I just don't think you can describe it adequately as to what it means. And so ultimately, I hope that every single family at Grace Avenue will take a step, whatever step that is, and can get on the path. And there's no telling what this church can become and do for this community if we all do it together.
Yeah. Kenneth, Suzanne, thank you so much for sharing your personal stories about your growth and generosity. Thank you for offering your invitation to the rest of our church family and your hopes for where we may join God going in the future for our church family as well. We hope that everyone feels that same encouragement, that same invitation, that same hope as we all make this commitment together this weekend.